Welcome to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today I sat down with Bob Albo, visionary fiction author of the book Her Dark Matter Necklace. This is the first book of his 3-book series. Bob shares his journey with us to how the book became a reality and explains to us what visionary fiction is. I'm so excited that he decided to stop by and become the newest member of the book club. Welcome, author Bob Albo. Bob, thank you so much for being on the podcast and being a member of the book club. Welcome. How are you?
Very well, Kelly. Nice being here.
I'm excited to talk to you about your book, Her Dark Matter Necklace, and your publishing journey. You know, the one question that I ask everybody is, did you always know that you were going to be an author, or did it just kind of come about one day?
I never knew I would be an author, and in fact, just the opposite. I was always a terrible writer. I had dyslexia as a kid. It wasn't a bad case of it, but I remember reading and I couldn't remember anything I had read. As a result, I couldn't write particularly well. So I tried to always avoid English and history and those types of subjects. My math and science was really good, so I really just focused on that. So I had no interest in becoming a writer.
So how do you go from no interest to, look, I'm a published author?
That's a good, yeah, it's a journey, I'll tell you that. So I worked for 30 years in technology, and I always liked science, and, you know, got an engineering degree from Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and a business degree also. And about 5 years ago, I wrote a metaphysical pamphlet, and that was my first exposure to it. And it was really just to get out questions that I had about science and social issues. And it was just kind of like a dialogue between two people. And that was my start. And from there, just about 2 years ago, I started to write my first novel, and it's now part of a 3-book series. So it's been a journey.
So the first book is out there and published. Are the other 2 books written, or are they up here? And then are they in your head, or are they on paper yet?
So the second book is on paper and complete, and that's planned to be released in end of summer. In fact, my first book, I did self-publish it, so that, and then I found a publisher who wants to re-release it, so that's going to be released at the end of this month. And then my third book, which would be the conclusion, I have the first draft done. But unfortunately, the first draft's a long ways away from the final draft.
So you say that, you know, you never knew that you were going to be a writer. You had dyslexia as a kid. You really didn't like English. Yet now, not one book, but a 3-book series. So where did the story come from? Is it a story that you just came up with one day? Is it something that you had like always been there, or how did you come up with the concept for a 3-book story?
I have no idea. I'll tell you what, it's such an odd process, and it's so alien to what I had always done before. I think it really comes from your subconscious. It's artistic, and it's not something I really did. Mine was really very logical. All of my work was always logical, figuring out where you're going to go, figuring out what the end destination is, and figure out how to get there. Book writing for me is totally different. And I don't know why, but whatever, I just start writing, and then it kind of goes in different directions. And I just find it fascinating. It's kind of like a voice that's in you that you just want to get out. I don't think I do it justice at times, but I try, and it's fun to do.
So when you say that you published your first book, you self-published, and then you found a publisher, how did you find the publisher?
Okay. So the book that I have, it's kind of a combination of sci-fi, spirituality, or kind of God, and then also, as I mentioned earlier, addressing some of our social issues such as inequality, as well as the purpose of life. And I was looking for a genre or similar authors that did that. And I really struggled. I mean, it's almost like if you do sci-fi and then you have a God at the same time, that becomes religious. And then you have sci-fi, it just doesn't work. And so I was really looking around for something where it would fit. And actually, there's a new genre of fiction called visionary fiction, which combines those things. It's kind of sci-fi, fantasy, and it combines that with spirituality. And then there's a transformation of either a person or a world. So it was actually a really good fit for that. And then it turns out, because it's a new genre and very few people know about it, they have an alliance group and they have other authors, and then they have one publisher that's really focused on that area. And so that way I was able to hook up with him. And that's been very beneficial. And the writers are all very supportive, get together a couple times a week and try to help each other on the whole social media. Some people have been around a lot longer and so are much more established, but they're more than willing to help out some of us newbies.
And that's really great. And you're, I think, maybe the third author that has mentioned the term visionary fiction to me. So I'm hearing of the genre more and more. And I think it's really cool that you guys found a place where you're not kind of lumped into it's either sci-fi or it's spirituality, because it sounds like it's a blend of both. Yep. So with that being said, tell us about the book. Give us like a little synopsis about the book and what's it about, because this book spans over three books. So it's got to be a pretty in-depth story.
It is. It's a story of a teenage girl who needs to save the world through beauty. So that's a somewhat, I understand, common theme. It's kind of the hero journey. And that's the big picture. But the stuff that I've really focused on are the ideas, ideas and answers. So, some of the things that I explore in the book is, is there a God, obviously? And if there is, how was the God created? And so it's funny, you talk to religious people, he was just there. Well, I actually have a scientific explanation on how he was created. And then if there is a God, is there a broader purpose of life? I mean, you don't really see that from religion. So that's been interesting. So I kind of go into that and, again, tie it back scientifically on what that could potentially be. Some of the other things that I explore, I like to look at facts that people just take for granted. So one of the things that's interesting is, Homo sapiens have been around for about 200,000 years, and we're all Homo sapiens if you're listening to this. And about 20,000 years ago, something happened. And we started to do a lot more things than we ever had before. Genetically, we're the same as we were 200,000 years ago. So 90% of our history, all we did was we were a little bit, we were like herd animals. And there were a lot of other human-like creatures around, like Neanderthals were around. But 20,000 years, and by the way, Neanderthals were bigger, stronger, and smarter. They had bigger brains than Homo sapiens. But nevertheless, 20,000 years ago, something happened. Not I don't think in the DNA, but something happened, and we became the dominant species on Earth. We wiped out all of our, quote, competitors. Neanderthals, I think, a lot of people have maybe 1 or 2% of those genes in them, but, we pretty much just wiped out everything around us. And what was that thing? It wasn't physical. There's something else that's going on. So I talk a little bit about that. Another thing that came up was, and I'll ask you, do you think people are driven, or I'll ask you, Kelly, are you driven more by logic and rational thought or by emotions?
Ooh, you know what? That's a good one. It really depends on the situation, because for the most part, I like logic, right? I like logic. I like to be able to understand and, figure it out. If I understand it, then I can accept it a little bit more if I get kind of where it's going. Emotion, I would say, that to me is an impulse. That's an impulse for me where I'm not thinking, I'm just simply reacting purely based on emotion. But me personally, I prefer the logic. Doesn't always work out that way. Because sometimes, you just get caught up in the emotion and you just react, but I prefer the logic.
All right. So let me ask a follow-up question to that. Do you view emotions as a strength or a weakness?
I think they're both. I think they're both.
So these are just some of the things that I bring up. And I think if you look at your life and you look back on your life, the big decisions that you make are going to be emotional, not logical.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I said I like the logic, but the logic too doesn't always work out either.
No.
That logical answer sometimes does not come about. You can see the logical answer, but stuff just doesn't work out that way.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny, my wife actually calls this the book of Bob's big ideas, or Bobby for short. So that's why the book is different, and that's why people might be interested in it.
So what is it's a trilogy, so what is the first book is out now, the second book has a release date of?
End of summer.
In the summer. And then the third book, are we looking at this year or are we looking at next year?
It'll be next year. It'll probably be sometime in the beginning of next year.
So, Bob, since you're in this new genre, this visionary fiction, how do you market that? I think marketing is tough for anybody who wants to sell a book, kind of figuring out what that secret sauce is to reaching all the readers who want to read your book. But how do you do that with the new genre?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure that we actually know. As I mentioned, I did the self-publishing initially. And, I think I sold 100 or so books. And it was all through to friends and to friends and family. And they liked the book. And they said, this is great. And common question was, where did this come from? But, other than that, it was pretty interesting. But as far as the whole marketing side, the book launch will be in 2 weeks. And I think I'll be in a much better position to say what works and what doesn't from my publisher. I had questions. I mean, I was thinking like on Amazon, you could put ads next to famous books or popular books that would be similar to yours. That was one idea. Facebook's the same sort of thing. But one thing that it turns out that I hadn't realized is the whole push is that 1 week at book launch. I always thought, get the book out and then take your time marketing it. That's not the way it works. It's when you release it, you need to really push the marketing at that point. And if it takes off, great. And if it doesn't, they're not going to continue pushing it. So that's been the other, you think about it, it's probably the way movie theaters work too when they release movies. If it doesn't do well that first couple of weeks, they pull it out of the theater.
Nobody cares, right? Yeah.
So it's really, it's really weird. I was thinking just the opposite. You have a slow ramp up of interest after release, but that's not the way it works. You got to start off strong, and then it kind of takes off from there, if it does take off.
And even try to do a pre-launch, which is something that I would have never thought about either. Building the buzz before it comes out.
Yeah, exactly. So, my book, you can pre-purchase it online. So I think they're trying to get a list of people that would be interested in it. The problem is that I don't think a lot of people would go to my website unless they're friends and family. So that's going back to your point about the whole marketing side. It's tricky. And honestly, I did a lot of marketing in technology, so I can see the problems.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, you want to, I'm a firm believer in that there's a reader for every book. Mm-hmm. Somebody out there, wants your book. The trick is, how do you let them know that your book is available? How do you reach them? Yep. And that is the $64 million question, as my grandmother would say.
Right.
How do you know? How do you do that? And so that's why I like to ask everybody. Have you ever thought about putting the book on audio?
Actually, my publisher wants to do that. He says he's had very good success with that.
Yeah, I think books like that, where you've got, your book isn't science fiction, but it kind of is, and then you've got this other side. And for me, when I read stuff like that, I want to be able to close my eyes and picture it. And so being able to hear it would be, I would like things like that. So I love audio.
Okay, good.
I like to read too, but I think that's the way to go, especially with that genre and just the way it sounds too. Visionary fiction. Yeah. It makes me feel like there's a lot to see, in the world that you're going to describe. And I want to be able to close my eyes and then have somebody read it to me so that I can spend time trying to figure out what it looks like.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's great to hear.
So I think that's great. So tell us, what are the name of all three books?
The first book's obviously Her Dark Matter Necklace. The second book is called A Cry for Beauty. And the third book will be A Fight for Beauty. So, and it's really the transformation of this girl who really, in the first actual book or two, she struggles. And it's not until the third book that she really starts finding herself. And there are some interesting things that happen to her that really changed the whole thing. And it's kind of where my subconscious goes. I kind of got a little bit tired of writing about a younger woman, and kind of she kind of goes through a time piece and becomes older towards one of the books, without revealing all the surprises in the book. I think where that came from is that I've always believed that people always have that second act in them. That first act, you have your career, your family, you're really focused on those sorts of things. And then you complete that, and what do you do next? You can continue working, doing those types of things, or you can try doing something else. Or I guess you could retire and do nothing. And some people do that. But I really do think there's everyone has a passion which you might not be able to take advantage of because if you write like you're not going to make the money that you want to make. So maybe try to, get the career earlier, and then later on in life, go back to that passion that drives you.
You had a passion to be an author and you didn't even know it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have 3 books out there. Some people find it hard just to put out the one, right? And you've got 3.
Yeah. Again, it's really weird. I don't know where it comes from. And I think, probably everyone has this in them if they just are open to it. So.
Yeah, I would agree. So, do you have other books planned besides these 3? Do you have like another story that you would turn into like a trilogy that you're thinking about?
I have started thinking about it a little bit more. And I think it would be I don't think I'll go back to a child protagonist. And the reason the reason I did it was because I wanted all of these ideas to seem more approachable. So if a little girl could do it, then everyone should be able to, approach it. The problem that I had, which for better or for worse, with a young protagonist, people immediately think, okay, a young adult type of book, even though my content really wasn't that way. It was really for adults and raising issues. How many kids are interested in the purpose of life? I mean, of course, you could come back and say how many adults are too.
Right.
But I would think most that would be more likely to be an adult topic. I think young kids are just trying to get along, fit in. I think later books, I like the big ideas, but I don't know what the story will be at this stage. But I do think it'll be more of an adult type of story.
Well, I'm so glad, Bob, that you came on the podcast to talk about your book. Again, tell us where the name of the first book is Her Dark Matter Necklace.
So if you want to pre-order, you can do that on bobalbo.com. It's a website. Or you can go to the publisher. It's called Vizia Fiction. So if any of your listeners are interested in this type of genre, they can see a lot of other authors that do this. And if there are writers, maybe they would find this to be interesting for them. Some authors that you probably have heard of is, Dan Kuntz is a couple of his novels are there. And Jim Carrey actually wrote a book which fits in this genre.
Did.
Yeah, and it fits.
Is his like a visionary fiction? Does it fit in that genre?
Yeah, exactly. So I read it. It's different. It's very different. Of course, so is Jim. So, but there's some really interesting authors there, and so people, again, if you're either to read or to if you're a writer, and this is the type of writing that you do, it's really a good thing to discover.
What's that launch date?
I think it's, I just remember it's being, I think it's like the 31st or right around day after Easter, I guess.
Day after Easter.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So all the information for the book and for Bob will be in the podcast description. Bob, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, being a member of the book club. This does mean that you are an official member of the book club. Ooh. And that means that you are welcome to come back and talk about your second book when it goes out. Yeah, so end of the year, or you said fall.
In the summer.
In the summer. So I expect you to come back to talk about the second book in the trilogy, and I'll be expecting to hear from you. I've just got to reach out and say, Kelly, second book's rolling. Be like, we'll make room for you to definitely come on and talk about it, because you are now an official member of the book club.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly.
You are very welcome. Thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bright Headed Publishing Audiobook Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. I just wrapped up with author Bob Albo, and we talked about his book, Her Dark Matter Necklace. That is the first book of his 3-book series. All the information where you can get the book is in the podcast description. If you're an author or someone who supports author and would like to be a member of the book club and be on the podcast, email me, brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. Again, that's brightheadedpublishing@gmail.com. Next week, a new member to the book club, a new author. But until then, keep writing.